Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag where I answer your questions, your concerns, your takes, and ultimately your comments on tennis and other stuff. About 24 hours ago, I posted in the YouTube community tab, which you can find on the homepage of my channel, and 68 of you left comments. I've read through those comments, and I must say I am very excited for this episode of the mailbag. I've been doing this every other week, if you haven't noticed, and I think that's just right. Not too rare, but also not too often. I think I've struck a good balance here. I've been enjoying them every other week. Do a Friday mailbag. It's great. The first question today comes from me, actually. What do you think of the facial hair? Because I've always been one to shave the facial hair, but I've been told not to, and I'm giving that a try. And I know there's not much, but you can let me know what you think about that. I know that's a challenging way to start this for those listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform, but who knows? Maybe you can hear it. Maybe it's coming through in some way. All right, without further ado, let's get started. Or maybe I already have gotten started. That was the first question. One thing I did is I asked people to re-comment the comments I didn't get to, but I liked on the last edition of the mailbag. So let's start with those. First one comes from Gold Wolf. The French Open is being stupid. They plan to have 50 to 60% fan capacity with no mandate for masks. Why would players prefer to play the French with such subpar standards compared to the super strict player-safe US Open protocols? The first thing I want to qualify is I haven't looked into the French Open safety protocols at all. But 50 to 60 fan capacity, no mandate for masks, that sounds like that sounds a little bit laissez-faire, no doubt. But as for the heart of the question, why do players prefer to play the French? I think there's two things. The first thing is what I covered on last week's Monday Match Analysis. They don't want to quarantine. That's going to be a major deal breaker for a lot of players, and understandably so. Quarantining, I haven't personally had to do it to a very extreme sense. I did hunker down, so to speak, but I didn't quite quarantine at any point during this. But it's intimidating. It's not something that anyone should really be looking forward to doing. So with any kind of quarantine requirement, that's going to be the number one thing that could scare players off. And since the French Open is a member of the European Union, my understanding is that, in terms of traveling through Europe, there will be no quarantining requirements. The second part of this, though, is the reality of a generational gap in how concerned people are about contracting COVID-19. It is something that is rooted in science, right? Because older people are at a much higher risk from suffering more, severe consequences from contracting the virus when compared with young people. But you do have to remember that tennis players usually fall between the ages of 35 and 20 years of age. And that demographic is not so much concerned with getting coronavirus, more so concerned with perhaps the comfort level that they have in playing a Grand Slam. And safety measures, social distancing measures, and all that, they're not comfortable. You gotta deal with it. You gotta suck it up. You gotta toughen up. But they are not comfortable. And if someone doesn't feel awfully motivated to play the US Open because they can't bring their family, all right, you gotta accept that. You gotta just accept that. But certainly I think players are prioritizing, generally speaking, by the way, and I know that this is untrue for some players, and I know that some players are really concerned about getting the virus. For sure, no doubt. I think a lot of players are more concerned about their comfort. And we've seen that we've seen that in player behavior. No, I think we have. Now, just to be clear, none of that excuses. I'm not trying to make any kind of excuse or normalize reckless behavior, because you can contract the virus without being irresponsible, and that stigma is not good, because you can get it going to the grocery store or the gas station, and it shouldn't be stigmatized. Like, getting coronavirus shouldn't be seen as like, oh, you were irresponsible, how dare you. However, going around and being unconcerned with the potential of spreading the virus is a danger to public health, and that I'm not by any means excusing that. Okay, another one that was commented last week comes from Ajay, I believe it would be pronounced. Outside of Rafa / Novak, if they don't go to the U.S. Open, I have either Thiem, Tsitsipas, Medvedev to win it. How do you match these three up versus each other, taking into account they will be at Flushing Meadows, their styles, as well as past matches in their head-to-heads? And who would you see coming through amongst them? Will Rublev and Sinner be dark horses in your opinion? Sorry if there are too many questions. Love your show. Thank you. So I agree with that trio. Let me say that first. I agree that Thiem, Tsitsipas, Medvedev, I've been kind of consistent in this outside of the big three. Right now it's a big two. They are the ones to watch. I agree. When it comes to their how well the U.S. Open suits them, I'll just go one by one. I think Thiem has shown that slow hard court can be a really great surface for him. He's had great results at Indian Wells. He's the defending champion there. And I think he's also shown to be able to play really well at the U.S. Open. Last year, unfortunately, he was ill and couldn't showcase his abilities on the Queen's hard courts. But the year before, he pushed Rafa Nadal to 5 sets, so that counts for something. I think it's a really good surface for Thiem. Tsitsipas is still a player where his best surfaces are still somewhat unclear. But I will say that I think Stefanos can benefit from the fact that there are no crowds. And I think as the tournament nears, we can get into which players might be negatively affected from the fact that there won't be a crowd and which players may be positively affected. I think Tsitsipas is one player who really could benefit from it because I think it could relax him a little bit. I think he's someone who is prone to get a little bit too tense, put a little bit too much pressure on himself. The way he put it at the beginning of the year, and I was kind of vindicated when Tsitsipas said this, because I was saying that he kind of needs to calm down a little bit on the court. And at the beginning of this season, he said that he's going to try to take it a little bit less seriously. And again, it's really good that he cares, and it's way harder to get a player who cares and put them in the right mindset than to get a player who doesn't care to care. So don't get me wrong there. But I do think that the absence of a crowd might calm down Stefanos Tsitsipas, and I think it could be a good thing for him. That's purely speculative, but that's my read on it. As for Daniil Medvedev, I really do like him on quicker surfaces, and I do have the feeling that when Daniil Medvedev fully breaks through at a slam, and I know he's the 2019 U.S. Open finalist, he was playing unreal tennis. It didn't matter what surface you put him on. He was on an incredible run. So don't get me wrong. I fully understand that. I still like Medvedev's game better, probably in Australia and at Wimbledon. I think that his biggest, I think he benefits from a lower bouncing court and a quicker court where he can have a little bit more of a punch off the ground. I don't think that he is someone who is going to hit through slow courts very well. So, Medvedev scratched and clawed his way through the U.S. Open last year with just unbelievable heart, but he was on such a magical run where everything was going right, from hitting first serves on the second and it, going in and blah, blah, blah. I don't think I need to defend it any further. As for how they match up for each other, let's do that. Thiem against Tsitsipas, I think with Thiem's improved serving, I think he could readily be able to take advantage of Tsitsipas's return, which is at this point in time possibly his weakest shot. And I also think Thiem does a tremendous job of attacking the righty backhand. Thiem against Medvedev, I think Thiem is similar to Nadal, and we've seen Rafael Nadal is the player who's given Daniil Medvedev the biggest problems out of the big three. Dominic Thiem is a player who is a really, really good low ball hitter, largely in part to thanks to how much RPM he generates. And he's really, really good at generating his own pace. That's largely thanks to the racket speed that Dominic Thiem brings to the court. So I think Thiem matches up pretty well against both of them. One thing that Medvedev might have against Thiem is toughness and shot tolerance. So in best of five, Medvedev might be someone who can test Dominic Thiem in that area. And I do think that that's the next step. I want to see Thiem dig deep and come through a match that turns into, or come out of a match that turns into a war of attrition and a battle of wills. I just haven't seen that from Thiem yet. It'll come. I think it'll happen, but I do think that's the next step because his game has become so well-rounded and something that's so difficult to deal with. Tsitsipas against Medvedev. I think Medvedev has had a mental edge, a substantial mental edge against Stefanos Tsitsipas ever since they've formed like a quasi-rivalry. I don't think Stefanos has played well against the Russian at all. And I think that's just because he's wanted to beat him too bad because I don't think they like each other. Am I crazy? Am I missing one? I did both the teams. I did Tsitsipas, Medvedev. I think we're good. Are we good? Yeah, we're good. And then there are a couple other questions in here. Rublev, Sinner, dark horses. Sure. Sinner just needs to develop physically. And that's clear as day. He's not a big boy yet, right? He's not up there. I'm pretty sure if you ran a combine with the top 20, Sinner's just not the athlete that he needs to be yet. But that just comes from developing his body, and that is not alarming by any stretch of the imagination. He'll get there. And Rublev, yeah, I mean Rublev is at a top 10 level right now, probably close to a top 5 level. So I don't even know if you can call him a dark horse anymore because I think everyone now notices how good Andrei Rublev is. All right. Sip of coffee. What else do we have? Okay. Another one that was asked last week. How would you rate the slams in order of prestige and why? I'm from Australia and love the Australian Open, but would put it last. For me, it would go Wimbledon, French Open, US Open, and Australian Open. That's the order I think most tennis people would put it in, but I actually think that has kind of changed because the French Open and disclaimer, let me put out a disclaimer. I haven't been to Australia. So I've been to the other three. I haven't been to the Aussie Open yet. The French Open, from what I've seen, certainly compared to the US Open and Wimbledon, and from what I've heard, they've also fallen behind the Australian Open when it comes to facilities and amenities. The French Open, the grounds are kind of cramped, and it just doesn't quite have the same state-of-the-art feel that the other three have. So I don't know if I would put the French Open second. I think certainly Wimbledon is first. Sorry about that. And you can just feel the history You just feel it. And not to mention the tournament is meticulously run and there's so much beauty attached to it. Wimbledon is first. But then for me, it's New York, and maybe I'm biased. I mean, that's my home major. If you ask me what major would you want to win, Gill Gross, I would say the U.S. Open. That's just the major I grew up with and going to, and that's just how it is. But yeah, I think New York second. Then it's the French, and then Australia. It's just catching up. 80s, and then even in the 90s, a lot of players were skipping it, but they just made it such a great. I think they just made the experience so good that it became irresistible, and now, which I'm really happy about. Now everyone is everyone is playing all four, which is great. Okay. I think one more from last week. This is from Swagat. How would you rate the slams in terms of prestige? Oh, I just answered that. Yeah, he also thinks Wimbledon, Roland Garros, U.S. Open, Australian Open in that order. Outside of Rafa Novak, if they don't go to the U.S. Open. Oh, I answered that too. I see what he was doing. He was compiling all the questions that I wanted to answer from last week. Wow. Okay, I get it. Thank you. All right. That is it for last week. So now I can just go to the most liked comments. This one comes from Silver Wolf. Will Novak and Rafa play U.S. Open? How is everything going over there with the state of Black Lives Matter and the coronavirus? Are you doing okay? How do you feel the American landscape will shift in the next few years if the current state of things remain the same? First, Novak and Rafa in the U.S. Open. I don't think Nadal is going to play. I think a lot of that has to do with the concern over the tight schedule and wanting to be 100% for the French Open and preferring to play on clay and preserving his body. I think these are the things at play. I don't think has anything to do really with, everything has to do with COVID right now, but I don't think it has to do with, how uncomfortable he feels about the virus or the safety protocols. And certainly it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. But I don't think Rafa is going to play the U.S. Open. And Novak said, I'm going to play unless I have to quarantine. Again, I think so many players are going to be in that boat that they want to play, but they're not going to do it if they have to quarantine upon arrival in Europe. How is everything going over there? That's a super loaded question. So I'm going to skip that one because I can't summarize how everything is going in the United States. We'd have to do I don't know. That would be maybe a 13-hour show. But am I doing okay? Yeah, I am. So to be completely honest, this summer I had two plans. One, I was thinking that maybe I would be in LA doing some stuff with Tennis Channel this summer. That was made impossible because of the coronavirus. So that was disappointing. And if I wasn't doing that, I plan to really ramp things up on YouTube just for the summer. So I could cover really the heart of the tennis season. I was going to be able to stop some of the other things that I'm doing, and I was going to be able to really hone in on doing this show, which I was also really looking forward to. So that was disappointing, but ultimately I'm good. I have not lost a loved one. I have not lost a job. And I'm not battling, depression or any mental health issues, which I know has been a really big problem with everything that's going on. So I'm doing well, and thanks for asking. And then the last question here is, how do you feel the American landscape will shift in the next few years if the current state of things remain the same. So I will always toe the line when it comes to polarizing worldly issues that don't have to do with tennis. Obviously, whenever it comes to these kind of topics, you're going to get both your news, information, and opinions from wherever you think is the best place to get those things from. And by the way, it's very important to understand which is which, but that is neither here nor there. You're going to get those things from wherever you think is best. You're sure as hell not coming to Gill Gross for that. I know that. So, I always keep that at the forefront whenever I'm dealing with this kind of thing. So I'll keep this short and simple. I think that there has been social progress, and I think that there's actually a lot to be kind of happy with in terms of the change. I think there's real change happening. That's how is the American landscape shifting? All I can say is I do think it's shifting, and conversations are being had that need to be had that weren't being had before. And I'll just give you one example is the fact that corporations are willing to say Black Lives Matter, and just that, again, 5 years ago, that phrase was a phrase that, corporations were staying away from and really not going anywhere near. And, that is just one example. I do think that the goalposts have shifted here, and I do think social progress is happening. I had one more thing to say. Oh, and I think that a lot of people have learned a lot, including myself. I think this has been a time where a lot of people have learned about, or have at least made an attempt to understand the Black experience in America. What is it like to be Black in America? And just now, first of all, you can't really understand that unless you are Black in America, but making the effort to try and understand what that experience is has been something that probably a lot of people haven't done until recently, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, moving on. All right. Before 2001, there were only 16 seeds at majors compared to 32 now. Do you think we should go back to that system since it creates more popcorn matchups early on in tournaments? I meant to look into why the change was made, and I'm sure top players were happy. Okay, let me give you both sides of the argument. And this is probably why the change was made, but I haven't verified this. I think the good part is that when the best players are there at the end, it makes for the best results. Now, sometimes a Cinderella is fun, but if you look at, and this is a common misconception, if you look at the highest rated, this is true for all sports, the highest rated sports in terms of TV ratings, it's generally the people that we're supposed to be bored of. When the New England Patriots are in the Super Bowl, it tends to rate higher. When LeBron James is in the NBA Finals, it rates higher. Is he there most years? Do people say that we're bored of LeBron James? Yeah, we do. Do some people say that they're bored of the big three? Yes, they do. It's the same thing. When the big three play each other in the final, it's rating better. It just is. And the product's better, which is, it's more important to me. I'm not a television executive. I don't care how the thing rates, but when we have situations like in 2017 where Kevin Anderson is making two finals, you're not getting great finals there. You're just not. Nadal at the US Open, Djokovic at Wimbledon, you're not getting good finals. So by having 32 seeds, theoretically, it protects the better players, and you're going to have better round of 16s, and you're going to have better quarterfinals. I get all that, but I don't really like it. I'd rather it be 16. I am someone who thinks that If you're good enough to win the tournament, your draw shouldn't really matter that much. Or even if it does matter, oh well, that's how this works. Luck of the draw. I don't need draws to be fair. But ultimately, my number one, this is where I'll end it because this is how I feel. I really don't like the fact that a lot of the time the premier match on center court, or if you have a ticket to center court at Wimbledon or Arthur Ashe or Philippe Chatrier or Rod Laver, in the first week of a major, you're seeing a lot of bad matches. By bad, I mean not close. And I think that's unfortunate. You know, nothing is more pronounced than the U.S. Open night session. Generally in New York, the organizers put the best two matches of the day, one women's match, one men's match, as the night session at Arthur Ashe. And there are too many times first week they're not compelling matches. And if that wasn't the case, that would be a lot better. You know, I mean, just if we had, you know, second round, let's say second round, we have a guy like FAA, who, if there were 16 seeds, wouldn't be seeded. If we had FAA play Djokovic, Nadal, or Federer in the second round of a major, and you put that as the night session at Arthur Ashe, I just think you'd get a way better product, and that would be enjoyable for me. So I actually would rather it be 16 seeds. Okay. Here's a comment with 6 likes. Is it easier or harder for Novak to win the U.S. Open without Roger and Rafa? Sounds like a silly question, but checking the last Novak's results versus Roger and Rafa and the fact that the next gen guys will only have to beat one big 3 member make me hesitate. At the end of the day, I think when it comes to Novak, Dominic Thiem has belief. Daniil Medvedev probably has some belief based on, every time they meet, it's a close match. But no, I think it's harder for Novak to win the U.S. Open without Roger and Rafa, because what you get in Roger and Rafa are 2 guys who at least know when they take the court that they can win. At least know what it feels like to beat Djokovic at a slam. None of these, well, Thiem knows what it feels like. But a lot of these players, these next-gen players, they don't know what that feels like. So that's where you get, it's not really about what's harder for Novak, but what are the chances that someone shrinks under the spotlight or just, doesn't have enough belief to close out Djokovic, even though they can play good enough tennis and Novak's on an off day, right? Belief matters a lot. And it's definitely better for Djokovic that there are less guys in the field who know what it's like to beat him and certainly believe that they can. How long have I been talking? 28 minutes. This might be a long one. I'm not in a rush this time. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I had a bit of a time crunch. Who among active players is the best according to you when it comes to executing drop shots effectively? That question comes from Garish. So I think, let me give it some categories, okay? Let me give it some categories. I think Rafa Nadal probably has the best drop volley in men's tennis. I think Novak Djokovic probably has the best backhand drop shot down the line in all of tennis. It is so, that specific drop shot is so darn automatic for Novak. It's unbelievable. But Roger Federer is the guy who can hit drop shots from seemingly any position in any situation. That's kind of the difference. You never really know when it's going to come. You don't know, forehand, backhand. There's a million different positions on the court and different kind of drop shots that Federer can hit. So I would consider overall Federer to be the best drop shotter on tour. Some other guys who I think deserve shout outs, certainly Benoit Paire, especially on the backhand. I would say Fabio Fognini deserves a shout out for his drop shotting. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Andy Murray, who's the most common drop shotter of all of them. And by the way, it's probably unfair not to maybe lead with Murray, because and Murray goes to it more often because he has to, especially on clay, on a slower surface where he doesn't feel as comfortable putting opponents away off the ground. He can take away depth and use the drop shot as a means to end the point because it's a little bit harder for him to do it with the forehand. So Andy Murray is also right up there in that elite tier. Oh, Nick Kyrgios. That's the last guy I want to mention. Kyrgios certainly deserves to be there as well. That's a fun question. Amine. It might not be Amine. Amine, I'm a fan of his music, though. This is not that Amine. Hey, Gill, I'm following you from Algeria. And apologies, just let me blanket apologize if I mispronounce your name on one of these. How do you explain the fact that big countries like Japan and Germany don't have Grand Slam events or at least ATP Masters 1000? They are economically stronger than France, for example. And do you think that a change of location of one of the 4 slams would be possible in the near future? Great job, carry on. Appreciate that. These tournaments are so old that, when you look at the modern economy and the world structure, it didn't resemble what it is today. And you would have to ask like a true historian why these things shaped up this way. The country that I always think about is India, though. And I know that a lot of, I see the analytics. I also see the comments. I know that there's a lot of people from India who follow the channel. And I see on Twitter a lot of tennis fans from India. And it does surprise me that they don't have a bigger tennis tournament. I know that they have, I believe it's pronounced Pune. But it surprised me that they don't have anything more. Germany, Halle and Stuttgart, and Hamburg. So they have a lot of tournaments, but, again, I think a lot of these tournaments were organized a long time ago, and then Japan has Tokyo. It's 250. It's just not, it's not how it works. It's not like the biggest countries have the biggest tennis tournaments, and I don't think it really has anything to do with economic strength. It has to do with tennis tradition, probably, and who was running things at the time, which is how a lot of things work. Are you confident the U.S. Open will go ahead, or does Washington's cancellation raise more doubts? I would say it's pretty clear and smart for Nadal to skip the U.S. Open, but what about Djokovic? I already answered that. So I'll talk about the first one. Right now, how am I feeling about the U.S. Open? I'm nervous about the field, and I'm not clear on what their point of no return is. At what point would the U.S. Open decide that it's not worth having a tournament? If I were to guess, that point is pretty far in terms of a decimated field. I don't think the U.S. Open is going to be very quick to say, oh, well, the field isn't great, so we're just going to cancel. I don't think that's happening. There are much bigger economic incentives at play here. I would be shocked if a slightly or moderately reduced field would be enough for the U.S. Open to cancel. Also, as I covered on last week's Monday Match Analysis, the U.S. Open is thankfully not in California or Texas or Florida, all U.S. states that are having trouble controlling the virus at this time. New York City as well. Right now, the numbers, the curve is flat, which is bodes very well. It means that there won't be any kind of, seemingly, again, things can change. At the moment, it wouldn't be likely that anything would change in terms of the government's approval for the tournament to go on. So I do still think the U.S. Open is happening. A final decision needs to be made very soon. I believe John Wertheim of Sports Illustrated reported that the decision will come in the coming week, I believe, because I think they want to know before August for sure. The next question from OCS: why is everyone on Twitter saying you are Ugandan? I think you are the only one. I think this person, OCS here, my friend, is the only one saying that I'm Ugandan. And someone else, probably his friend. I think it's hilarious. I've gotten a good laugh out of this. I've seen this in the comments before. And it's very funny. I don't know where it comes from, but, I'm glad that this is the meme that has found my comment section. It's great. Who is the highest level on grass, highest on clay, and highest on hard court? This seems like a pretty, almost a softball question. This is, I think most people would agree, Federer on grass due to his serve, forehand, and net play prowess. Nadal on clay due to the incredible topspin he generates off the ground, his movement, and his tenacity, shot tolerance, toughness, and all that. And Djokovic on hard court, which is, it's kind of the hybrid surface, and Djokovic is kind of the hybrid player. Pretty simple. What else do we got? Stefanos here left a long comment saying that Djokovic loses against Nadal because of the weather. Let's see. So if shot tolerance and consistency are the keys for great success on clay, then there is no reason why Djokovic loses against Nadal. Nole is second to none regarding shot tolerance and consistency. He has proven already against Rafa at the Australian Open and on grass. Here's the thing. If you look closer at their head-to-head on clay starting from 2011, the score is 8-6 for Nadal, and Nadal built that advantage mainly at the French Open. In the other tournament, Nole has the edge. Other tournaments, Nole has the edge. So again, why Nole loses at the French? Monte Carlo, Madrid, Rome are played on clay, so the problem is not clay. My theory, since I can't find a technical reason, is that Nole is really affected from the hot climate in Paris. Every time they meet, it was really, really hot, and Nole can't take it. I don't know if the weather's been that extreme. I would say a couple things here. One, best of 5 is different from best of 3. And if you want a technical, and this isn't a technical reason, it's a tactical reason, this is what I'd give you. On hard court and grass, Djokovic is doing most of the dictating against Nadal. And he's moving Nadal around more than Nadal is moving him around. That's the dynamic that has persisted on quicker surfaces due to kind of, in my opinion, the cross-court patterns and the serve-return battle. But that has not been the case on clay. I think that because Nadal hits a heavier ball than Djokovic, because he returns a lot better on clay, because his forehand is the biggest weapon on the court on clay, Nadal is doing more dictating against Djokovic on the surface. And that's where best of 5 is going to be a lot different than best of 3. And perhaps Djokovic just, over the course of 5 sets, is just less likely to be able to sustain his highest level. But I also think there's something, gladiatorial and intimidating against Nadal at the French Open, and it's real. The fact that he hasn't lost there, or that he didn't lose there until 2015, it also just has a lot to do with the fact that he's going to lock in more and he's going to peak more at the French. That's just, he's going to be more consistent at the French. or if not more consistent. I mean, it's just a different ballgame. Thiem has beaten Nadal in the lead up to the French Open every year now. But when they meet best of 5, French Open, Nadal is getting the best of things. Hey, Gill, your session on Rafa and Nole serve improvement was great. I have 3 questions for you. 1, French Open 2017 final. I thought Stan is one of the 3 players who can handle Rafa's forehand with his backhand, but I was surprised to see the scoreline. A lot of people might have thought this could be tough for Rafa. Were you surprised with how the match went along and the scoreline? I don't know. I mean, Stan is really pushed back by the Nadal forehand. He's pushed back very, very far. But, you know, I don't want to comment on that match because I haven't seen it since 2017. Next one, 2019 Wimbledon final between Fed and Nole. I was surprised to see Fed's game. I don't think he had shown that kind of level and variety before. Frankly, I expected that it might go like 2014-15 finals where it felt that Fed was surviving. Would it be right to say that this was Fed's best individual performance? I am from India. There you go. Indian fan, see? I wasn't surprised. I thought Federer was playing great tennis, and I thought he was showing match toughness. Again, I credit it to the fact that he played the clay court season, and not only played the clay court season, but played it really, really well and beat everyone who he was supposed to beat. That is to say, beat everyone outside of Rafa Nadal and Dominic Thiem. Who, according to you, are the top 5 underachievers and overachievers in tennis since the year 2000? Underachiever, I mean, if you want to say like someone who just didn't try, who's really talented, I mean, the popular answer might be Bernard Tomic, Ernest Gulbis. You know, those guys are notorious for not caring very much, and both of them were very, very talented. I almost want to think outside of them, though. Like, who's someone who tried and still underachieved? I guess the jury's still out on a few of them. I guess there are some players who had unbelievable runs and played unbelievable tennis at certain points, and then they just didn't really continue it or sustain it. You know, like I would say Verdasco was just never really the guy who was playing the Australian Open in 2009. And that was kind of disappointing. I don't think Tsonga got that much better over time. You know, Tsonga was a good player. You know, he made the finals again in Australia in 2008. I just don't know if he improved. I don't think his footwork ever really got to a place where he could compete with the very, very top. So maybe those are 2 names that I could throw out of guys who just didn't really quite make the progression. You have the French players, right? You have the Gasquet, you have the Tsonga, you have the Monfils. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting topic. I would have to delve into it with a little bit more fervor. Off the top of my head, it's kind of a difficult one. When is the next episode of 3? Luis Ayala asks that. That'll be next week. Next Thursday, I believe, as of now. Amy is moving. She's moving her house. That is a large undertaking, and she had to deal with that this week. So we had to take a week off, and we'll be back next week. Myself, Joel Drucker, Amy Lundy. If you haven't checked it out, go to the homepage of my channel, take a look at recent uploads, and you will see it. Okay, here's a long comment, but I do think it's a thoughtful comment, so I will read it. It's from Cedric. I will start out by saying that I watch a lot of live sports, and I also play a couple sports. However, I would say that tennis is one of my favorite sports to play, while one of my favorite sports to play is one of my least favorite to watch. And I've often wondered, why is that? Here's my reasoning. It's all about personality. Let me do a golf parallel to further explain my point. I'm a big golf fan, and I follow a YouTube channel called Golf Subpar, which is a podcast that does extended interviews with mostly professional golfers and sometimes other athletes or personalities that have an interest in golf. The questions asked during the podcast are sometimes serious, and sometimes it's just about funny stories of pranks around the locker room or on the golf course. That way you get a pretty complete picture of the personality of the athlete. They got some really high-profile golfers like Jon Rahm, who was at the time of the interview number 3 in the world. He's now the new number 1. These extended interviews made me care a lot more about the players that I knew them knew of them by name before, but I didn't bother watching because the only metric I could use to determine whether I would follow their round was their golf game. These interviews have brought another metric, their personalities. For instance, just because I know that Charlie Hoffman, okay, I'm gonna skip this anecdote. My point being, why is such content impossible to find or maybe even impossible to produce for tennis? I, and I'm sure many others, would kill just to hear funny locker room stories or more serious stuff from players that we watch all year round. The closest comparison with the golf podcast I found were the many Instagram lives between Stan and Benoit Paire. Since they are good friends, they were talking about everything from life, Stan's favorite drink, why Benoit is so weak mentally. He said it himself. All that content gave me a sense of who they really are. And next thing you know, I'm a Benoit Paire fan. This would never have happened before those Instagram lives because I didn't like Paire's attitude on the court. But now that I know him more, I understand why he's frustrated, which makes me perceive his anger in a much more relatable way. I know this is a long, not very polished reflection, but what do you think? Do you think it would be a good idea to have 1-hour interviews with top players? Do you think people would be more attracted to tennis? And do you think this kind of content is feasible? Why or why not? I think your comment stands best by itself without my input. It's just a valuable comment because I think this is very valid. And there is an access issue in tennis, a bit of an access issue. Players are not very accessible. Not just the top players, but even the lower ranked players. There is usually a lot of red tape to go through if you want a one-on-one interview with the players. I don't see a lot of players doing podcasts on a regular basis. I've made the comparison with Ariel Helwani in mixed martial arts, where more or less, and that show is a lot younger than tennis and, was really a lot less mainstream just a short bit ago. But there are shows where you pretty much hear from all the athletes after their biggest fights immediately after and immediately before, or at least one or the other. It's just not the case in tennis. Yeah, it's not. It's not. Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic play that match at Wimbledon. You get their post-match press conference. You get them talking with the rights holders. Maybe they interview with BBC, they interview with ESPN, they interview with Tennis Channel, but they're not going on any podcasts. They're not doing one-on-one interviews with, the likes of great journalists like Joel Drucker or Steve Flink. They're just general, or Christopher Clary or John Wertheim. They're generally not. There's kind of an access issue. John Wertheim's piece for 60 Minutes when he went and did a piece on Nadal. That is rare. I wish it wasn't. That is rare. Federer has done one-on-ones with GQ about shoes or Complex about shoes or 50 questions with GQ. But that stuff, it's so rare. And I wish it was less rare. And I think the best thing is if players at the very least self-promote themselves through social media. I think I get a pretty good idea of who Stefanos Tsitsipas is. A weird, quirky, yet passionate and, kind of philosophical guy. That's who Stefanos Tsitsipas is. Why can I make that assessment of his personality, of his character? Because he self-promotes, he self-brands. He's on Twitter, he's on Instagram, he has a YouTube channel. These things are good. But it would also be, the media just doesn't get a lot of access. I don't know if that's going to change. I don't know. I don't really see that. I think that there are some great personalities in the sport. But I think at a certain point, someone needs to change the way they get themselves out there. My plea to the players would be this. It is profitable for you to go on podcasts. It is profitable for you to put yourself out there. Be liked. Get people to like you. Talk to people. By the way, I should mention Novak recently did something with Graham Bensinger. So it's not completely never. It's not like they're shut off, that the media never gets access. But in the big picture, there's less access, and it's very difficult. Even if it happens, it's difficult. You got to go through a manager. You got to go through agencies. You got to go through tournament PR people. It's difficult. My plea to the players, you will put more money in your pockets if you get your personality out there. Leave it at that. Okay, let's do a little lightning round here. Let's do a lightning round. Why does Nadal always get easy draws at the U.S. Open? Shouldn't they count as 8? I don't like talking about draw luck. It's ridiculous. Because it's not the player's fault that they have an easy draw. It's just not. So, do you think Rublev might be able to play lights out? Yes. Do you think the bounce will be low enough at the French because of the cold weather that will enable Novak to rush Nadal on his forehand wing? Because other than that, I don't think Novak can beat him even on hard courts. Forget about clay. I don't know how the weather is going to affect Roland Garros. Excluding members of the Big Three, what are some of your favorite matchups to watch? How about potential matchups between Next Gen plus Thiem, such as Thiem versus Tsitsipas, which produced a great match at the ATP Finals? Favorite matchups? It's a good one. That's a good one. We got to think about that one. You know, Medvedev and Wawrinka has been intriguing recently. I think that they've played interesting matches because Daniil beat Stan at the U.S. Open, but then Stan beat Medvedev at the Aussie this year. So that's been interesting. I just don't want to spend so much time. This is one I have to think about. Thiem against Del Potro, put two of the biggest hitters in the game on the court with each other. And then the last one I'll give is Kyrgios and Tsitsipas. I love the contrast there. I mean, they are opposite personalities, and that's really good spectacle to me. They played some good tournaments, or some good matches rather, in the hard court season last year. Thoughts on Nishioka? Really talented, but he's got to figure out a way to serve bigger. ATP froze all points, and Djokovic's total weeks at number one aren't counting during this time where no tennis is played. I get that logic, but at the same time, between two seasons when no tennis is played, it's regularly counted for the overall weeks on number one spot. This is true. The past 3 months, Novak is the official number one. I do not see any logic why then those weeks are not counted. Your opinion. Regards, Alex. Thank you for the comment. Here's what I say to that. If you are Novak Djokovic, if you are a fan of Novak Djokovic, you should not want these weeks to count, because you do not want a record with an asterisk. You just don't want it. It just opens the door for the chatter and the yeah buts and the whataboutism. You don't want that. You don't. Novak Djokovic will have every chance in the world to break the weeks at number one record that belongs to Roger Federer. He will have all the chance to do that without getting aid by the COVID-19 pause. And if you're Djokovic, if you support Djokovic. You should not want the record to be broken this way. You should want the record to be broken with tennis being played. And one of the big words that everyone has used to describe this time is unprecedented. And it's like this annoying buzzword that you keep hearing, unprecedented. But like, that's why you can't compare a regular offseason to right now. Because the offseason, the 1 month where there's no tennis, and that always counts towards weeks at number one, it's precedented every year. It happens. This is unprecedented. I think they're doing the right thing here with the freeze, and I don't think Novak Djokovic should want the record this way. That's all I got. Remember, if you're listening on podcast platforms, leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It is a huge help. And I appreciate all the support, all the comments, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.